Rural Heritage on RFD TV is brought to you by Rural Heritage Magazine, a bi-monthly magazine featuring articles about farming and logging with draft animal power, small-scale diversified family farming and homesteading, and other aspects of our rich rural heritage. Rural Heritage Magazine, borrowing from yesterday to do the work of today. For subscription information, please call 319-362-3027 or order online at www.ruralheritage.com. Ken and Martha Laing operate Orchard Hill Farm in St. Thomas, Ontario, just across Lake Erie from the Ohio-Pennsylvania border. Their 93-acre organic farm is carefully managed to provide productive harvests while improving and protecting soil fertility. Ken spent the better part of a day showing us around his farm and talking about a few of the tools and techniques he uses to manage it. In this episode, Ken talks with us about his intensive rotational cattle grazing system, a few of the vegetable crops he raises, and a cover cropping experiment he's conducting.
So right now it's 93 acres. And it's sort of a long, narrow farm. That's not always the best design for a farm, because you've got fields that are too far from your barn. But the way this farm, the geography of it, we're up on top of a hill, and the fields close to the barn are too steep to till, so they tend to be left as permanent pasture, and the level land down below is used for growing vegetables and hay and my grain crops. And we can leave the steep fields in sort of permanent pasture. And Martha and I started farming here in 1979, but she's the sixth generation of her family on this farm. Her early ancestors came here in about the 1820s and cleared this farm. So we started out being a pick-your-own-fruit farm with strawberries and raspberries, and later we had peaches and elderberries. We did that for about 17 years. We weren't the biggest pick-your-own farm around, and 10 years into our farming careers we decided to go organic, and that was problematic in that peaches are very difficult to grow organically, so we were left with growing strawberries and raspberries. And you've got to remember, this was in the early 90s when the market for organic fruit wasn't well developed, and we were having trouble marketing even 2 acres of strawberries between Windsor and Toronto, which is a huge area. We had pick your own. We were selling ready-picked berries over that big piece of geography and still having trouble marketing it all. So in 1997, we started a CSA. We quit growing the pick-your-own fruit. We still kept some strawberries and raspberries for our CSA customers, but we started our CSA in 1997. And it was essentially started by my wife Martha and my daughter Ellen as a way to earn money to put Ellen through university. But we also quickly realized that it was one of the most profitable things we'd ever done, and also well suited to the use of draft horses, because with vegetables you don't have to till so much land to generate a very decent income. And also the net income represented about 50% of our gross income, so it was a very profitable thing to do. We realized that we could offer young people an education in CSA farming and horse farming in return for their labor. So they would come for the growing season from the end of March till into October, and help us with all the labor of growing those vegetables and selling them through a CSA. And we would teach them how to drive horses and do all the work of a CSA in return for their help. We did eventually start paying them a stipend, and we would supply them room and board as well, because most of them would come from a distance, and often even other countries. Well, this is sort of a retirement project. As I sort of slow down and don't want to till so much land, we've taken 22 acres. We've put a good high tensile 4-wire fence around the perimeter. We've got a dividing fence down the middle, and then we have temporary fences that we move every day to give the cows and calves a new section of pasture each day, and then that gives the pasture a good recovery time. It's just very effective at making pasture more productive, controlling parasites and growing good meat animals. Part of it was used as a CSA a long time ago, and part of it's been used to grow corn and soybeans in strips. It's always been laid off in strips to control erosion, and also to give me field sizes that are sort of horse size. Pulling into a 20-acre field with a team of horses leaves you a little bewildered because it's such a large field and it's going to take you days to get across that field. If your strips are more like 2 acres, it feels a lot more like you're making progress with horses. Intensive rotational grazing is a very good management system because your pastures will be more productive. And I think it's a system that a lot of farmers aren't aware of. They may think it's too expensive to put in all this fencing and to move the cows every day. But with the technology I have here, I can turn this fence on and off. It tells me the voltage, which way the current's flowing. It'll actually point to which way the short is. If you've got a short in your fence, that's a very important piece of equipment. And now I can go in, fix the fence, go in and adjust and tend to the cows without having to run to the barn to turn it on and off.
I'll let you go first to prove it.
Yeah, it is turned off. And I mean, it's powerful enough, it gives you quite a kick.
I know it. And then here's your temporary fence.
Yeah, so here we have the temporary fence. It's a poly tape, but actually it's a more sophisticated poly tape than you used to be able to get. It's actually got a bundle of stainless steel wires in the middle. So there's actually a fair amount of wire in that to transfer the shock. And I can reel these up pretty quickly, and this is just my my improvised post carrier.
Oh yeah.
So, I walk along, reeling the fence up, throwing the posts in this this pail here, and I can take the posts with me, so I don't have to come back and get the posts later.
And do those posts just get pushed in?
Yeah, there's sort of a step on it.
Yeah.
You can push in the ground. Yeah, they work very well. And this is my mineral feeder. So inside here we've got some salt.
Yeah.
And you can just pick it up like a wheelbarrow and wheel it to the next strip.
Nice.
I built the metal wheeling device, but then the other's just sort of a standard mineral feeder.
Uh-huh.
It is a little tricky to build something that the cows can't tear apart. They're a little tough on things.
Yeah.
And so this is my water system. I don't buy fancy water troughs. These nylon recycled barrels work really well, and it has a float valve in it, but I can easily dump it out, move it to the next strip, and plug in my water. There's a hydrant every 50 feet. So.
Nice. So will they be grazing somewhere different tomorrow?
They'll move to the next strip here. So tomorrow morning I'll come down here and call to them, let them group here, take down the fence, and they'll all transfer into the next strip. They get used to the pattern pretty readily.
And they want to get over there.
Yeah, by tomorrow morning there'll be even less. Well, in Canada too, I guess some people in Manitoba were involved in it, where they had a retired plant breeder actually breed some potatoes, and then they farmed out the selections he had created, and they would send like 50 to us, and each one was a different potato really, and then we would select them for whatever characteristics we had a priority for.
Okay.
And we actually discovered a very good variety which we've grown out for a few years now, and actually it's being tested out in the field in New Brunswick this year, just on a very small scale, to see how it stacks up against other varieties. But it's been very promising here.
So he was hybridizing different potatoes, or he is trying out different existing varieties of potatoes?
He would take existing varieties and then cross them.
Okay.
It's sort of complicated because
I bet.
you actually have to create seed,
Yeah.
which potatoes don't produce naturally.
Right.
Not all varieties.
Right.
So he had to sort of be selective about what the parents were, because he needed ones that produced seed. So there's quite a few different varieties in here, as you can see by the color of the flowers.
Yeah.
But there's been no hand weeding in here so far. There will be some later in the season. They're all planted at the same time. There's actually a few different varieties we selected last year. We've done this for 3 years now. We've quit now because we've got the material we want, but there's still a few we could select from, and you can see these are suffering a little bit. You can see the sort of tip burn on there. That's from leaf hoppers, and it's very hard to see them. Sometimes you can see these little white insects fly away as you brush the leaves, but they produce this damage. Some of this here, probably leaf hopper damage. It's one of our biggest pests. But this variety we selected for its resistance to leaf hopper, and it's just amazing, but it's also very productive. And it tastes good, and it stores well. We sort of checked it out for all those things, and it's the only one of those 50 that we started with in 2016 that made it. And actually, from 2 years ago, I don't think we've saved, I'm not sure we saved anything. And then last year, we're still checking these out, and there's a difference because it looks like maybe the second one is quite a bit cleaner, quite a bit healthier than these first two. So, but this one may make it to the point where it changes the organic potato industry a little. So it was a fun thing to do.
Sure.
I mean, first we open up a trench, maybe 4 inches deep, drop in the seed pieces. Then we cover it up with hilling discs and actually create a hill, because when the weeds germinate in that, I either knock them out with a spike tooth harrow, which is cheap and easy, or a finger weeder. I can use the finger weeder even when the plants start coming up, because it'll sort of work around plants, or potato sprouts are quite tough. And that'll get a lot of weeds in the row. And then when those plants are big enough to withstand hilling, I will hill them lightly the first time, but it's mostly weed control. Then the second time is to keep the tubers from getting green, because those tubers aren't down at the bottom of that 4-inch trench. They're more on top of the ground.
And you want to prevent them from getting sunburn?
Or greening, because actually that's toxic too to people. So that's sort of the whole procedure. We have more trouble with weed control at the end of the year. Like once the plants die back, then the weeds will take off sometimes if we're delayed digging them. But generally fairly easy to grow. So it's a fairly large trial that I'm doing for the Ecological Farmers Association of Ontario. It's a farmer-led research project, so I'm interested in developing no-till techniques for spring cereals. That's what the focus of this project is. So I have 4 treatments, 4 different cover crop combinations: sorghum sudan grass by itself, oats, barley, and peas, oats, barley, and faba beans, and daikon radish all by itself. And then my control that I'm comparing it to was fall plowed ground, worked in the spring and planted sort of conventionally. So in front of us here, we have one of the control strips. They're replicated 5 times, so all of those treatments and the control are done 5 times, and we check the yield in each plot and look at the numbers, the averages, and do some statistic analysis just to make sure that we don't have higher fertility at one end or in one strip, which skews our results. So it's fairly scientific, and hopefully we get some numbers that will show us what's the best winter-killed cover crop to use. So sorghum sudan grass looks very impressive as a cover crop because it'll grow up at 8 feet tall.
Right.
And I have, you can mow it a number of times as long as you mow it high. And in that case, the weed control can be fairly well, but this was planted late. It was only mowed once, and the weed control is terrible, as you can see in that strip.
Yep.
And so we were hoping the faba beans and the peas would fix some nitrogen and maybe show some difference, but the daikon radish is not a legume, and here it is beside my controls. and it is definitely looks to be the best. Pretty decent weed control. It's not that it's weedless, but pretty decent. And it's beside, this is a strip of oats and barley and either peas or faba beans. I don't have my sheet with me, but almost as good as a daikon. But it's not quite as well developed, in spite of must have had a little nitrogen from the legume and a little more weeds. And another strip of sorghum Sudan grass, too weedy. Probably back to oats and barley and legume. The no-till strips were planted April 6th, very early, especially for this year. And then my control was very typical. I had to wait till early May, about the 6th of May, to plant the control strips. So that's why there's such a difference. It's headed out much later.
And that's just because the ground isn't ready for plowing. Is that right?
Well, it wasn't ready even to work. Like, it was plowed in the fall.
Okay.
It had to be worked and seeded, so it had to dry out a certain amount. Whereas with the no-till, the residue on the surface will sort of hold up your drill, and you can actually plant quite a bit earlier.
So this rhubarb, would you have been harvesting it?
Yes, it's been harvested quite a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of dollars of rhubarb been sold off there.
Okay. You leave a lot.
Yes, like that's not a problem at all. If you harvest everything, it sometimes will kill the plant.
Yeah.
It needs to be able to feed that root to get through the winter. And rhubarb is a native of Tibet. You know, it comes from the mountains. It's actually a pretty tough plant, but it doesn't like hot, dry soils. Like, I know people who've tried to grow it in sandy soils, very challenging. It likes sort of a heavier soil, and it just loves to be mulched to keep the roots cool. So we mulch it very heavily with hay. If you look in here, you know, you're going to find a pretty heavy mulch of hay. The hay has more nutrients in it than straw, so it seems to be a superior mulch. And then our garlic, there's already been a harvest of garlic scapes out of here, and probably in 2-3 weeks we'll dig the crop for the bulbs. And it's been planted sort of like no-till. We just open up a trench in some 8-inch tall oats, barley, and peas that's been planted about the 1st of September. Garlic planting time for us is in the first weeks of October. We just put the garlic in about 6 inches apart, covered up with hilling discs on our riding cultivator, and then that cover crop of oats, barley, and peas will winter kill, and then we'll come in and cultivate early in the year for weed control. We won't mulch it as a lot of people do. And there's not enough residue from the oats, barley, and peas to control the weeds. Yeah. And then this is our method of growing early sweet corn, and maybe we should use it for the whole season of sweet corn after looking at the challenges of seeding. So this has been transplanted. We grow these transplants in plugs in the greenhouse, and then come out here with our horse-drawn plug transplanter and plant out this sweet corn. And it's gotten off to a good start.
It sure has.
So this isn't weeds like it looks like.
Radish.
Yeah, this is actually daikon radish,
Yeah.
and there's oats and barley in here. This seed was a bit of a mixture. I thought there was some crimson clover in it, but I do not actually see any crimson clover. Although,
These are little clovers, are they?
well, there is some. Here's a plant here.
Yeah.
Pretty sure that. Yeah. So it's just to cover the ground, retain the nutrients.
Yep.
I mean, we're not worried about erosion on this field very much. This is a special variety of asparagus called Millennium, and it's an all-male variety. So these flowers are actually male flowers, and the reason they breed to get rid of the female flowers is the plant is not going to waste any energy making little fruit, which we don't harvest or need.
Right, right.
So it's very productive. And this is just partly grown. This is going to be even taller and bushier. In places where the row is thick, it'll actually probably kill or sort of shade out the cover crop, but the cover crop helps keep the weeds out. I mean, nature likes to see things green, and if you don't plant a cover crop, the weeds will grow to cover that ground.
Yep.
And Martha was at a conference once and heard a guy, I think he was an asparagus grower from BC, tell her about this hilling technique. So partway through the harvest season, we will throw dirt into the row, make a hill, cover the weeds, and it gives us pretty decent in-row weed control. I think only once has this been hand weeded, and for a perennial crop, that's very challenging. Asparagus is a little fussy. It likes a site with no shade, good drainage. It'll grow in a lighter soil. It's very deep rooted, but it is a trouble to keep it weed free, because we do like broadcast tillage in the spring because the crowns are planted deep intentionally so that we can disc over the whole thing, clean it up in the spring, and then let it grow and harvest it. And then we plant this cover crop at the end of harvest. And you can see the hilling that we've done to control the weeds right in the row.
Do you then mow the asparagus? The
Only after it's dormant in the fall,
right.
Or you have the option of doing it in the spring.
Yeah. Upcoming episodes will cover some of the cereal grains Ken and Martha raise, a no-till grain drill Ken designed and built, the Suffolk horses they use on the farm, and some of the ways they add extra value to their crops. This program is available for purchase. To order your copy, please call 319-362-3027 or visit www.ruralheritage.com. Rural Heritage is a bi-monthly magazine dedicated to draft animal farming and logging, as well as other aspects of our rich rural heritage. It is published by Mishka Press, which also offers a complete line of back-to-the-land books, DVDs, and calendars. Call or write for a catalog or subscription information, or visit our website at www.ruralheritage.com.